Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ADOT, of course, the DBE Supportive Services Program. So we're so excited to be with you today. So I'm going to do my first order of business. My name is Angela Booker, and I'm going to be your host today. And I'm going to call this meeting to order. So if I had a big gavel, I'd hit it, but I will just say the meeting has been called to order. So before we get started, I know that you all are chomping at the bit to get this vital information. I've got to give you a Steve Jobs quote. Steve Jobs said, "Great things in business are never done by one person. They're done by a team of people." So today we're going to bring you a team of people who are going to help you in your businesses, to help your business grow and to help keep you out of trouble. So I'm excited today to bring to you the DBE Supportive Services program updates, who will be done by Francesca Martin. She's our Small Business and Workforce Development Officer. Francesca, please take it away.
Thank you, Angela, and good morning, everyone. It's so good to see such a great turnout for today's DBE Task Force meeting presentation on the Davis-Bacon Rule Agreement. We felt the task force meeting was an appropriate time to ensure that we could provide some education and some clarifications regarding the several types of industries subject to DBERA, Davis-Bacon Rule Agreement. So before we get started and bring up today's presenter, I wanted to share a few updates from our Business Engagement and Compliance Office. We have 2 new staff members that have recently joined the DBE Supportive Services team since our last task force meeting. We are very excited to welcome Lorena Nava. She is our new DBE Supportive Services Program Manager. You will hear from her shortly. Lorena has served the great state of Arizona for over 2 decades, holding a variety of positions across multiple state agencies. She's experienced working closely with all local, state, and federal governments as the supportive services manager. She's going to directly plan, develop, and oversee all of the supportive services activities. And then in addition to Lorena, we also have added Alexa Romay as our new DBE Supportive Services Specialist. Alexa will provide the overall support for our program, primarily focusing on tracking and reporting data to Federal Highway. She'll also manage all of the outreach and the promotional communications. So we're delighted to welcome them both, and I look forward to your continued collaboration with the new team. So with that, I want to turn it back over to, actually, we're going to turn it over to Lorena. She's going to provide some updates regarding the DBE Supportive Services program. Lorena.
Thank you so much for the warm introduction, Francesca. Good morning, and thank you all for joining us today. I am happy to serve as the new DBE Supportive Services Program Manager in ADOT's Business Engagement and Compliance Office, and I am dedicated to understanding how our team can better support your business needs. Feel free to reach out to me and our DBE Supportive Services Specialist, Alexa Romay, for guidance and support in pursuing opportunities with ADOT at DBE Supportive Services at azdot.gov. Well, it's certainly been a busy quarter. We successfully completed the 10th cohort of the Business Development Program, empowering 9 graduating firms with business and industry training to improve their operations. And we recently held our DBE and Small Business Conference in Tucson, providing a platform for over 100 DBEs and small businesses to engage in valuable connections and insights into project opportunities with prime and buying agencies during one-on-one speed appointments and dinner connections. Looking ahead, we are well underway in our planning enhanced educational and networking opportunities to prepare you for what's ahead in 2024. Stay connected to our DBESS communications for upcoming work, events, and announcements at our azdot.gov Business Engagement and Compliance DBE Supportive Services newsletter and communications. Thank you so much. With that, I will now turn it back to Angela.
All right, thank you, Lorena. That was some great information. Now, are you ready for more? Well, I've got Greg who's going to come up, and he's going to give you an update from the ADOT SECO. Greg, are you ready?
Yes, I am. So we have a bunch of projects that are getting ready to come out. We have a full program. Our 5-year program is larger than it's ever been. So we have tons of work that's getting ready to come out. One of the big things that I would say that you really need to do is get onto our contract and specifications website. Look at the upcoming projects as they're getting ready to come out for bid. Go to it often because it's constantly being updated so that you can stay abreast of what all we have to offer. As time goes by, you'll see more projects come through. It's an ever-ending array of projects that we're going through. We have projects of multiple sizes. We have some smaller projects. We have a couple of very large projects that are getting ready to come out. So there's tons of opportunity out there. And I just cannot state enough that we're looking for as much competition as we can possibly get amongst both primary and subcontractors. So pay attention to what we've got coming up, and good luck to you. We are looking for as many people to participate as we can possibly get. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg, for all of that vital information. So now, are you guys ready? Karina's about to come on the scene. So Karina is going to give us an update from the ADOT ECS. Karina, I am so looking forward to all of your info.
Good morning. So we are coming up on our biennial pre-qualification period. Happens every even year. We will open it up on November 1st and it goes through December 31st. We would like to have these pre-qualification applications submitted as early as possible, especially if firms are planning to submit a proposal, an SOQ, on a advertisement in early January, on any advertisements that may be in early January. We have 6 upcoming project advertisements. We have one currently out on the street and 3 on-call advertisements out there as well. Again, always take a look at the ECS website for any of these, any upcoming advertisements. And that is all that I have.
All right. Thanks so much, Karina, for all that information. So next, we're going to have Sarker, who is going to give us, who is with the ADOT CNS team, and who's going to give us some information. Sarker, I can see you. Let's hear you.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, I am with contract and specifications, and I will give you some information. I believe it will be helpful. And also, like Greg mentioned, I will encourage everybody to visit CNS website because there are tons of information that will be beneficial for all the DB firms. So I will start with current advertised projects. So right now we have just regular bid build project that we have 15 advertised projects. So if you are planning to work with any of the prime, most probably you want to be proactive and look up those project documents so you can have a discussion with the primes, what in your area of expertise, and work with them. And then we have future projects. So right now we have all the fiscal year 24 projects already listed there. I think that's almost 72 projects listed for until June 24 advertisement project. So they're all sizes, all different scope. And so whichever projects may be interested to you, you can find out. And then when it's advertised, you can start working with the prime right away. And another thing, some of the DB firms already prime with ADOT, pre-qualified contractors. But if you are interested to be prime, I think the pathway is to start work with some of the primes and then get some experience and then start filling out the pre-qualification application that As you know, every month we have our pre-qualification selection board. They meet together and review the applications. And that's the way you want to be part of the prime group, pre-qualified group of ADOT contractors. And one information, I think there will be follow-up discussion on Davis-Bacon. So we are now directed to include new federal aid contracting projects, the new form 1273. That will be implemented, all the projects starting from October 23rd, executed on or after. In the construction contract, we will be including that new form, which will have updates that related to Davis-Bacon waste determination information, I believe. So with that, and another information about the pricing. So since the market is still volatile, you guys know that we have 3 months bid tabulation that awarded last 3 months, starting from August, September, October, all the bid tabulation on our website. And you can check out the prices, how contractor bidding on the job. So that will help you to, I guess, when you provide the code to the contractor, so you can relate to that. So with that information, I will wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarkar. You gave us some wonderful information. I hope everybody wrote everything down. All right, so now it's time for our main topic. I know you all are excited as I am. As a small business owner, you want to know about Davis-Bacon. That's very important. So I just want to leave you with just one little more reminder that Steve Jobs said. He talks about innovation, and he said, innovation distinguishes a leader from a follower. So to be innovative, you need to know everything there is to know about how to keep your business in check in terms of Davis-Bacon. So we're excited today to bring Estella Robinson, who's the assistant manager for ADOT Field Reports. She's going to give us all the updates to Davis-Bacon and other related acts. So Estella, I am just truly excited, got my pen and pencil ready. So I'm going to turn everything over to you. And I want to remind everybody, if you've got questions, put them in the Q&A. If you look below the screen, move your mouse, you'll see Q&A. So put your questions in there because I know she's got great answers. Thank you, Estella. Take it away.
Thank you, Angela. All right, so my IT tech should be here any second in case I run into any issues, but can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. So right now I'm getting a message that participant screen sharing is disabled. So I think maybe I'm on the wrong
Estella,
side.
try it again. I just, you left and you came back, I think. So try it one more time.
Okay. So let's see. Okay, there we go. Give me a second. All right. Can you see everything okay?
Yes, we can. We can see everything.
Perfect. All right. Well, today I'm going to talk to you a bit about the United States Department of Labor updates to the Davis-Bacon and related acts. So I took some time to go through a lot of information, and I really pulled out what I felt was very relevant to my audience, but I would definitely recommend, if you haven't done so already, to check out the USDOL's website and all the related documents to these updates on your own. But without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into this. There's a lot to cover. And again, if you have any questions, if you can just, how are we handling the questions again, Angela? or Sarah? Or
Everyone
Rebecca?
put their information in the Q&A. So if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A. It's at the bottom of your screen. If you run your mouse at the bottom, you'll see Q&A. And then
Perfect.
I'll read them out to you, Stella.
Thank you so much. Okay. All right, so just, excuse me, to remind everyone that DBRA, which stands for Davis Bacon and Related Acts, applies to federal contractors and subcontractors performing on contracts in excess of $2,000 for construction, alteration, or repair of public buildings or public works. And sorry, there's a little window over here on the side that is blocking my screen and I can't see everything. Hold on. Let me go back. But anyway, so it only covers, of course, public buildings or public works, and those employees, it requires that those employees who are performing work on these projects are paid no less than local prevailing wages and fringe benefits for corresponding on similar projects in the area. While the final rule does not modify the types of projects subject to Davis-Bacon and Related Act standards, and there are several clarifications regarding the types of industries subject to the DBRA. So we're going to, get into all of that. So some of the categories that we're going to cover are prevailing wage rate, fringe benefit rate, area, agency, construction reports, multiple wage determinations, periodic adjustments, updates after award, reconsideration. And then we're also going to cover some definitions. There's changes or additions to the definitions regarding building or work, construction, prosecution, completion, or repair, especially when it comes to demolition, contractor or subcontractor, site of work, flaggers, materials, suppliers, etc. And then when it comes to the compliance part of it, there are some updates to record keeping, apprentices, flow down requirements. And I'm sorry, but I can't see everything on the right. I'm waiting for the IT tech to come. And fringe benefits and restitution. So first, let's talk a little bit about the changes to prevailing wages. All right. So the final rule, when it comes to prevailing wage rate, they did make some changes as to how they are going to determine what the prevailing wage rate is. So they pretty much just reverted back to the pre-1982 three-step process. So the first thing is, if there is a rate that is over 50% of the, majority would be over 50%, then that rate would prevail. So we're talking about when the Department of Labor is collecting all that data through its surveys, getting information from the collective bargaining agreements, and determining what the majority rate is that is paid to, specific work classifications. So of course, if it's over 50%, then that's going to prevail. If there is a rate that there is no majority for, then the rate earned by the greatest number of workers, at least 30%, that rate would prevail. If there is not a rate earned by at least 30% of the workers, then they are going to use a weighted average to determine what the rate will be for that classification of work. So the next thing is fringe benefits. If more than 50% of the workers are not paid fringe benefits, then the rate on the wage determination is just going to be zero. There won't be a rate for fringe benefits. If more than 50% of the workers are paid fringe benefits, then the rate paid to the majority, more than 50%, that's going to prevail. If no one rate is paid to at least 30%, then the wage and hour division will calculate an average of all the paid rates. Okay. Just a second, I got it. Okay. So the next area is alternatives for specific circumstance. So this is pretty interesting. When it comes to the area, the location where the work is being done, multi-county option for projects in multiple counties. All counties' data will be combined and a single wage rate per classification will be issued for the project. Number two, for highway construction, state highway districts or similar subdivisions may be used for area units. Number three, it integrates the multi-county option into the regulations for the project wage determination. When it comes to fringe, there was this question that was asked quite frequently. Does the final rule permit a contractor or subcontractor to take Davis-Bacon credit for administrative expenses incurred in connection with the administration of a fringe benefit plan? So the short answer is no. Consistent with the department's longstanding position with the SCA regulations, under the final rule, a contractor or subcontractor may not take Davis-Bacon related act credit for its own administrative expenses incurred in connection with the administration of a fringe benefit plans. However, credit for cost incurred by a contractor's insurance carrier, third-party trust fund, or other third-party administrator that are directly related to the administration and delivery of bona fide fringe benefits to the contractor's laborers and mechanics, that may be eligible for a Davis-Bacon credit. Should questions arise as to whether an expense is creditable towards a fringe benefit plan, the final rule directs the contractor or subcontractors to consult with the wage and hour division prior to claiming a credit. On ADOT projects, we would just have the contractor obtain prior approval from the wage and hour division before any credit would be granted. So that would be similar to just the same thing we do with self-funded fringe benefit plans. A contractor has to just send an email to the DOL and ask for approval of that plan. So the final rule on scope of consideration, this final rule eliminates the strict ban on mixing rural and metropolitan data so that, one, surrounding counties can be used when data is not sufficient at the county level, regardless of those surrounding counties' specific designation as rural or metropolitan. And two, the rural and metropolitan data can be combined at the supergroup level or at the statewide level as a last resort before concluding that no sufficient data exists for a classification. Then when it comes to functionality equivalent rates, a final rule creates a new paragraph to explain that the administrator can count variable rates that are functionally equivalent as explained by one or more CBAs or written policies of a contractor or contractors to be counted together as the same wage for the purpose of determining whether a single wage rate prevails. Supplemental wage rates. Where the wage and hour division, has received insufficient data through its wage survey process to publish a prevailing wage for a classification for which conformance requests are regularly submitted, the wage and hour division may list the classification and the conformed wage and fringe benefit rates for the classification, i.e. supplemental wage rates, on the wage determination. So this is quite different. Supplemental wage rates may be listed on wage determinations only if they meet the basic criteria for conformed rates. So I can tell you right now, in the state of Arizona, we don't have any traffic control classifications on the current wage determinations. So having this rule right here really would have come in handy. Right now, every time we start a new project, we have to request traffic control classifications to be added to the project wage data. We have to get that approval from the Department of Labor. But with this new ruling, if there was insufficient data received for traffic control classifications, then the Wage and Hour Division could just go ahead and list that classification on, wage determinations without the contracting agency ADOT having to request it, through our contractors and subcontractors. All right, one moment, please. Is there a way to get rid of this? Just making a quick little adjustment here. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. All right, so then finally, there's another rule that amends the regulations to explicitly permit the Wage and Hour Department to adopt state or local prevailing wage rates for both highway and non-highway construction under certain circumstances, where doing so would be consistent with the purpose of the Davis-Bacon Act. So in general, in order to adopt state or local rates, the administrator must determine that the state or local government's method and criteria for setting prevailing wage rates are substantially similar to those that the Wage and Hour Division uses in making wage determinations. Okay. So our next category is wage determinations. So some of the final changes that were made were in regards to multiple wage determinations. The solicitation and contract must incorporate the applicable wage determination for each type of construction involved that is anticipated to be substantial. The final rule notes that the department will continue to define the thresholds for substantial. And then there's periodic adjustments. So this is completely new. The final rule adds a provision authorizing periodic adjustments of certain out-of-date, non-collectively bargained prevailing wage rates and fringe benefit rates on general wage determinations. So as it stands right now, the current wage determinations that we have in Arizona have, of course, your rates where the collective bargaining agreements or the union rates prevailed. And then there are the other rates which are survey rates. So they're non-union rates. Those survey rates have not been adjusted or changed since 2009. And with this new rule of periodic adjustments, then the adjustments would be made based on U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistic Employment Cost Index, the ECI data, or its successor data. No more frequently than once every 3 years and no sooner than 3 years after the date of the rates publication. So we should never again have survey rates that are, 15, 16, however many years old. We now will have periodic adjustments like every 3 years. So that's a great thing to see. So I found this rule to be pretty interesting, and it has to do with updates after contract award. So we're still talking about wage determinations here. Wage determinations must be updated after contract award when the contract or order is changed to include additional substantial construction not within the scope of work, or the contract or order is changed to require the contractor to perform work for an additional time period not originally obligated, including when an option is exercised on a final rule. Also, I think I'm missing part of that. Sorry about that. Let me pull my notes here. Okay. All right, so the contract order is changed to require the contractor to perform work of an additional time period not originally obligated, including when an option is exercised on a contractor order. So I'll have to fix this slide because I want to make this presentation available to you all. I apologize for missing that. The final rule also provides that wage determinations in contracts require construction over a period of time that are not tied to the completion of any particular project, such as IDIQ contracts, schedule contracts, or long-term operations and maintenance contracts. They must be updated annually. Task orders issued under such IDIQ type contracts must incorporate the most recent wage determination modification in the master contract at the time the task order is awarded. So those are the final rules on updating the wage determination after the contract is awarded. So there was this question, do wage determinations still apply for the life of the contract? Well, generally, yes. The final rule, however, clarifies that if a contract is modified to include additional substantial construction, alteration, and/or repair work not within the scope of work of the original contract or order, or requires the contractor to perform work for an additional time period not originally obligated, including where an agency exercises an option provision to unilaterally extend the term of a contract, then the most recent version of any applicable wage determination or determinations must be incorporated into the contract. All right, so our next section that we're going to go over is definitions. So these are some of the definitions we're going to cover. And there are more than this that are part of the final rule. I just pulled out, what I thought was really relevant for today's presentation. So again, please go and look at the final rule on your own and to ensure that you don't miss anything that I may have missed as far as taking into account what I felt was relevant. So first off is building or work. So building or work, that definition now includes modern works such as solar panels, wind turbines, broadband installation, and installation of electric car chargers. It also clarifies that the installation of equipment or components into a building is under the definition of building or work. Also, demolition work. The final rule clarifies that demolition and removal activities are subject to DBRA labor standards when such activities in and of themselves constitute construction, alteration, or repair of a building or work. If the demolition is part of a contract for construction for a building or work, or if such construction is contemplated as part of a future contract, then the demolition is also within the scope of DBRA labor standards. So that means certified payrolls for whoever is doing the demolition work would be required. This provision is already reflected in current DBRA sub-regulatory guidance and the Service Contract Act regulations and does not expend coverage or increase burdens or complexity. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the definition of contractors and subcontractors and how the old rule and then we have the final rule creates some new definitions for contractor and subcontractor. The definition of prime contractor clarifies that in addition to the person or entity who enters directly into a federal or a federally assisted contract for construction, other entities are also considered to be prime contractors for the contract for the limited purpose of enforcing the Davis-Bacon labor standards. These include 1, the controlling shareholders or members of any entity holding a prime contract. 2, the joint venturers or partners in any joint venture or partnership holding a prime contract. And 3, any contractor, such as a general contractor, that has been delegated the responsibility for overseeing all or substantially all of the construction anticipated by the prime contract. Subcontractor means any contractor that agrees to, I think this is supposed to be perform or be responsible for the performance of any part of a contract. All right. So there was this question, just revisiting building or work again, demolition work. Is demolition work subject to DBRA requirements? So the final rule clarifies that demolition and removal activities are subject to DBRA labor standards when such activities in and of themselves constitute construction, alteration, or repair of a building or work. If the demolition is part of a contract for construction of a building or work, or if such construction is contemplated as part of the future contract, then the demolition is also within the scope of the DBRA labor standards. This provision is already reflected in the current DBRA sub-regulatory guidance and the Service Contract Act regulations. So we kind of already went over that. Another part of the changes or updates was to the site of work definition, secondary construction site. So the final rule revises the definition of site of work to include secondary construction site or sites, defined as off-site facilities where significant portions of a public building or work are being constructed, but only when the facility is either established specifically for the performance of the contract or project, or is dedicated exclusively or nearly so to the performance of the contract or project for a specific period of time. Because the existing definition already covered these facilities when they were established specifically for the performance of the contract or project, this change should only cause a modest increase in coverage. In addition, significant portion is limited to the cases where entire portions or modules of a building or work, such as a completed room or structure, are constructed off-site with minimal construction work remaining at the primary site of construction. It does not include off-site manufacturing of materials or prefabricated component parts. Given the limited scope of this revision, the department believes that any increase to the cost of affordable housing construction will be minimal, and that this revision will not discourage the use of modular construction technology in affordable housing. Oops, let me go back. There we go. So the change to flaggers when it comes to site of work, it is a long-standing interpretation that the DBRA requirements may apply to flaggers. Often, particularly for heavy and highway projects, it is necessary to direct pedestrian or vehicular traffic around or away from the primary construction site. Certain workers, typically called flaggers or traffic directors, may therefore engage in activities such as setting up barriers and traffic cones, using a flag and or stop sign to control and direct traffic, and or performing related activities such as helping heavy equipment move in and out of the construction zones. The final rule codifies the department's understanding that workers performing flagger activities adjacent or nearly adjacent to work sites are working on the site of work under the DBA. Such work ensures that construction work in and around the active work site proceeds in a safe and efficient manner, in part by protecting the laborers and mechanics doing the work, the flaggers themselves, and the public around the work site. So they've kind of like extended the area site of work for flaggers. Material suppliers. While not explicitly set out in the statute, the Davis-Bacon Act has been understood to exclude from coverage employees of bona fide material suppliers or employees whose only obligations for work on the contract or project are the delivery of materials, articles, supplies, or equipment. The final rule clarifies that activities that are incidental to material supply, such as loading and unloading and pickup, when performed in conjunction with delivery, do not constitute construction activity that would render the material supply exemption inapplicable. And then we have truck drivers. So the final rule codifies that the department's current guidance that requires contractors and subcontractors to pay DBRA wages to delivery drivers for on-site time related to off-site delivery if such time is not de minimis. The department has generally excluded periods of a few minutes on site just to drop off materials as de minimis. However, the total amount of time a driver spends on the site of work during a typical day or week. So let me say that again. However, the total amount of time a driver spends on the site of the work during a typical day or work week, not just the amount of time that each delivery takes, should be considered in determining whether the driver's on-site time was de minimis. So I know, we have a process here at ADOT whenever a driver is seeking approval to be considered de minimis, and they state, what their drop-off time or their unload time is. So I'm going to seek some more clarification from DOL on this, but it does appear that you're not just counting, the time spent unloading. You're also required to count the time that, you spend on the site getting to where you're going to unload. Perhaps you could be on the site for several minutes, just moving to the location where you're going to stop and unload. You would have to count all of that time. It would be considered in determining whether the driver's on-site time was de minimis. Then we have survey crew members, and we've always had some direction from DOL on surveyor crew members, but the final rule just clarifies that when considering whether a survey crew member performs primarily physical and or manual duties, it is appropriate to consider the relative importance of the worker's different duties, including but not solely the time spent performing these duties. So the survey crew members who spend most of their time on a covered project taking or assisting in taking measurements would likely be deemed laborers or mechanics, provided that they do not meet the test for exemption as professional, executive, or administrative employees under the 29 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 541. If their work meets other required criteria, so if it's performed on the site of work where required and immediately prior to or during construction in direct support of construction crews, and where the survey crew members are employed by contractors or subcontractors, then it is covered by the Davis-Bacon labor standards. So that was it for definitions. And we're going to go into compliance principles. So I just have a few here. The main thing was this record-keeping final rule. So the final rule revises existing record-keeping requirements to clarify that payrolls and other basic records must be kept for at least 3 years after all the work on the prime contract is completed. The final rule also requires that records include each worker's last known telephone number and email address. Contractors and subcontractors must maintain records of each worker's correct class classification or classifications of work actually performed and the hours worked in each classification. The final rule also requires contractors, subcontractors, and funding recipients to maintain Davis-Bacon contracts, subcontracts, and related documents. In addition, the final rule codifies the department's long-standing policy that valid electronic signature and electronic certified payroll submissions methods are permitted. There is also a final rule on flow down requirements. The final rule clarifies that upper tier subcontractors, in addition to prime contractors, may be liable for lower tier subcontractors' violations. Both prime contractors and any responsible upper tier subcontractors are required to pay back wages on behalf of their lower tier subcontractors. The final rule also clarifies that lower tier subcontractors' violations may subject prime and upper tier contractors to debarment in appropriate circumstances. The final rule explains that prime contractors are responsible for back wages of subcontractors regardless of intent, but upper tier subcontractors must have some degree of intent, recklessness, knowledge, for example, in order to be held liable for back wages of their lower tier subcontractors. So that's something that's really new. Conformance request. So if there's anyone on the call that's not familiar with the conformance request, a conformance request is just requesting the addition of an additional classification to be added to a project, which means, you know, if you look at your wage determination and you don't see the classification of work that is needed, that you know your employees are going to need, then you have to submit a request to DOL to add that classification just for that project. So the final rule contains a new provision aimed at reducing the need for the use of conformances. Now, I mentioned earlier how there are no traffic control classifications on the current Arizona wage determinations. So we are always having to request traffic control classifications to be added for every project. Well, with this final rule, if there are labor classifications for which the wage and hour division regularly receives conformance requests coupled with insufficient survey data for those classifications, wage and hour division will be permitted to provide wage and fringe benefit rates for those classifications ahead of time. This will provide contracting agencies, contractors, and workers with advance notice of the minimum wage and fringe benefits required to be paid for those classifications of work. So I'm really interested in seeing how this would all play out. But that's a big one, especially for us here in Arizona. All right, so we're getting down to the very end of my presentation. What I pulled out of the updates in the area of enforcement was this final rule on restitution. So the final rule adds language in 5.10a that requires interest to be calculated on back wages or monetary relief at the rate established in the Internal Revenue Code. The final rule also clarifies that interest will be compounded daily. So I don't have much more information on that, but I found that to be pretty interesting. Also, when it comes to enforcement, prime contractors cross withholding. Let's see if I can move this out of the way so I can see what this other part is saying. So the final rule further notes that where cross withholding is necessary to obtain back wages for workers, funds may be cross withheld from any other federal or federally assisted contract held by any of these entities where all other requirements are met. This will enable the the department to more effectively enforce the payment of prevailing wages for workers on projects where the project owner or developer is a single-use entity, as is frequently the case for affordable housing projects, among others. All right, so just a little bit of a, some little things that I pulled out here, a little information. So still covered under the DBRA are, of course, we talked about modern construction, solar panels, wind turbines, broadband installation, and installation of electronic car chargers if they are built as a part of a contract for a federal agency or otherwise covered by a related act. Again, demolition and removal activities when such activities in and of themselves constitute construction, alteration, or repair of a building or work. Survey crews and flaggers who perform primarily physical or manual work while employed by contractors or subcontractors on a DBA or related acts covered project on the site of work immediately prior to or during construction in direct support of construction crews. And again, delivery drivers for on-site time related to off-site delivery if such time is not de minimis. The DOL has issued guidance to determine if a project is de minimis. So I wanted to also provide for you all some resources. There is a DBRA comparison guide, and the link is there. So if you want to just take a look at the comparison guide, it talks about, I actually have a copy right here that I've been referencing. It's kind of like a chart. So it will, go over the existing regulation and policy and then the final rule, how the two compare, and so on. And then there's also a frequently asked questions link here that I saw some really valuable information in. So those two links are there for you as resources. And again, I'll always visit the USDOL's webpage to get all of your information, and reach out to your contracting agency if you have further questions. All right, so that is the end of my presentation. And so I guess we can open it up to questions now.
All right. So we do have some questions in the chat for you, Australia. So let's see if I understand what they're saying. So we'll get started with the first one. For averages and area, will ADOT field reports then issue project wage rates? For averages and area, will ADOT field reports then issue project wage rates?
Okay, so for averages and areas, will ADOT field reports then issue wage rates?
Yes.
Well, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I'm really interested in seeing how that is all going to all going to work out. So I think, what field reports is going to end up doing is meeting with the local Department of Labor and just really getting more information on what the DOL's position is on how this is supposed to work.
Okay. And we'll follow up with everyone, with answers and things that we find later. We can email those out. So our next question says, do contractors contact WHD before even going through the field reports? So do the contractors contact WHD before even going through the field reports?
Well, that's a good question. And I mean, that's always an option. However, if you contact field reports, we will give you the exact method that works to contact, the specific part of WHD. So you would just let us know, like I know I mentioned in the presentation that there were some items that you would have to get approval from the wage and hour division for. But if you contact field reports, we will give you the process on how to do that. And the good thing about contacting field reports first is that we know what the wage and hour division usually asks for. So we'll be able to tell you, okay, here's the email or the address and to contact contact WHD, and this is what you need to include when you submit for your approval. So I would recommend that, everyone contact field reports first.
Okay, field reports first. So everybody made a note of that, field reports first. All right, our next question is about updates after award. So it says, for highway, the scope does not often change. Is that correct?
Okay, repeat that. For highway, what doesn't often change?
They're saying that the scope does not often change, and they want to know if that's correct. They said also they've seen ADOT issue an IDIQ. That's usually, a federal one, but maintenance for P3s may need the update.
Mm-hmm. So that's a question that I would have to refer to our contracts and specs section. I honestly don't feel like that I'm qualified to answer that one, but that's a really good question because I kind of have that question as well. So we can make sure that we do follow up and get that answer for you.
Okay.
I just don't, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So hold on, the person who answered that question, that'll be one of the things that we look up for you.
Yes.
All right, so we have another question. Can you tell us what constitutes de minimis for drivers? Is it a percent of the time for a particular part of the day, or is it something else? If they're like 5 minutes of the full time, so they want to know how do they use that as a definition of what is de minimis?
Okay, so for de minimis, we use the 20% rule. So as long as the driver is not on the site of work for more than 20% of their work week, then they are deemed de minimis. So yeah, it's when we do have our reviews of de minimis requests, we are looking at a table or a chart that the requester has put together that tells us how many minutes per day that driver is on site. And then, it totals the minutes for the entire week. And then we can, of course, do the calculation and see that that is less than 20% of their work week, or if it's more, then they're not de minimis. So it's 20% of the work week. It has to be less than
20%. And should they keep that chart themselves, or is that just something that they should do on their own and just have a chart that they keep as well?
Yeah, well, the contractor or subcontractor, the driver creates the actual chart, and then they do send that in with a letter of concurrence from the RE that's on the project, with the understanding that they will continuously monitor this, because a driver could be de minimis one week and then not de minimis the next week. So it's really important that everyone understands that once someone is approved as de minimis, it doesn't give them, just like this free reign to then do whatever they want. It should be monitored always. So if there is a week that they do spend more than 20% of their time on the work site, then they do need to submit a certified payroll for that particular week.
All right. So now let's move on to electronic signatures. Are they allowed for employee documents too? Or that would be helpful for the workers in remote areas and on the highways?
So that's something that we will be discussing with the Department of Labor, because I noticed, oh, now I need to go back to my screen real quick. There was a word that jumped out at me. Let me see. There was one word that jumped out at me that I think we would have to get the Department of Labor's position on that. And I don't know if that word was valid or something else. I can't remember. But I think the bottom line is we have to ensure that, an electronic signature is a bona fide signature that the worker has provided. And I agree that it would definitely be helpful, and I totally understand. And I know, like with our certified payroll reports, we use a system called LCP Tracker, and they have, built into their system everything that is needed to ensure that it is a, bona fide electronic signature. And that's what we would need. And so I'll have to follow up on what the criteria would be for that electronic signature to be considered, whatever that word was. I'm sorry, I'm trying to go back through my slides and find it. Let me do a control F. So electronic, here we go. Okay, so they say a valid electronic signatures. So what does the Department of Labor consider a valid electronic signature? So that's what we need to understand, what their definition of a valid electronic signature is, what will constitute that.
Yes.
So that's my answer.
Okay. And then
Okay.
all effective as of October 1, is that correct? Or was there another date?
Say the beginning of that again.
Okay, they want to know, when is all of this effective? Was it effective October 1?
October 23rd.
23rd.
Yesterday.
Okay, we're talking like brand spanking baby new.
Yes.
Okay, last question. It says, when talking about trucking, what are the regulations when it comes up to sitting in a truck while waiting to drop materials? Does the time start when you actually begin dropping off the materials, or while they're sitting waiting for their turn to drop off the material?
Mm-hmm.
On a large project, there may be a lot of waiting time. So when does it actually start?
Right. All right, so let me go back. That's a really good question. And I think that that's also going to require some conversation. I know trucking is a huge part of this, the changes. And then as far as like the regulations, what the regulation says, and then putting that into practical use. So in the past, it was explained to me from the Department of Labor that, if the truck is sitting and waiting, if the driver's sitting and waiting in the truck in some kind of staging area or whatever, that as long as they weren't doing that on the side of work, then they were not covered by, Davis-Bacon and related acts. With this new rule, this final rule, it seems to change that. So I'm for that one, because trucking is it can be so complex. I really would prefer to talk more with the Department of Labor and find out what they feel about it. And just so you know, I did contact them prior to this presentation, and I'm talking about the local Department of Labor, and they were still trying to, I guess, wrap their minds around all these final rules themselves. So it was kind of like they would get back to me. So I have some of these questions that you've asked, I also asked, so I need to get clarification from the Department of Labor on it. And definitely this trucking question.
Well, that was our last question. Australia, we want to thank you for your time and your attention to this matter. I really appreciate you helped me understand some things. So, and I'm sure our audience got some things out of this as well. So thank you so much. And we'll get your information so that we can put it out there if you want to send information to everyone who attended, or if you want them to be able to contact you later, we'll do that.
Perfect. Yes, definitely. I definitely want to be able to respond to those questions that I didn't have the answers for. So I'm excited to do that because I want to know too. Okay.
Thank
And I
you.
appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone.
All right, well, that ends our session, but I want to remind everybody, all you business owners out there, Steve Jobs, I'm going to definitely end with a quote from him. He said, remember quality. It's the one thing that'll get you remembered and the one thing that for sure will get you forgotten. So remember quality, everybody. And thank you all for attending, and we will get you more information as time goes on. So everybody have a great day out there and be safe.